program. Thank you so much for being here. I sometimes life creeps in and it kind of upsets the apple cart. And that happened today because we have a sick kid at the Washington household. And as you know, I'm the primary on the kid stuff. So I was the one who was helping her get back to where she needed to be. Um, I've got her back home now, and we have a plan in action to get her better. But it meant that I was actually at the doctor's office for the first segment. So we did a little bit of a replay there, but I'm here now live and direct to you. Welcome to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. It's great to be with you. And it's also great to have our next guest. It's Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Koch Industries, Mark Holden. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
You know, I'm excited to talk to you about this. We've had a few other guests on. We've had White House surrogate and then some people who are very, very intimately involved with the process leading up to this new package, the First Step Act. We're interested in having a conversation about the good, the bad, the reality of this bill, because no bill is perfect and all bills come with a little bit of unintended consequences. And so can you talk to us a little bit about your opening line is why Congress should support the First Step Act. Tell us more.
Yeah, no, well, I'd say that mostly from my perspective, and everybody has their perspective on bills, obviously, I'd say I don't see anything really that bad and definitely anything ugly in this bill. It's pretty much all good. And really, take a step back. If you look what's happened the last, 10, 15 years in the states, particularly Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, red states, they have fundamentally transformed their criminal justice system. And they've kind of laid out the blueprint, if you will, for how to make it a more effective, more just, and safer environment for everyone in their criminal justice systems. And a lot of what this bill is doing, particularly the prison reform elements, are based on the successes of the states and doing things based on evidence-based practices and data-driven practices and not on fear and emotion or hunches. We're using data now. And that's very exciting. So for the prison reform part of it in the First Step Act, the whole idea is there'll be risk assessments, and to the extent someone has a low-level or minimal risk clearance or classification, there are opportunities for them to take classes, programs, so they make themselves better. And over time, they can earn these earned time credits if they're low-risk, minimal-risk people, and they'll be allowed to do some of their sentence. It's not a pre-release. It's not a reduction in their sentence. It means that they can do some of it in a halfway house or home confinement if they are low risk and they're doing well in their program. Overall, the whole idea is that we've got many people in our prison systems across the country. The federal system has around 200,000, and 95% of the people in prison come out someday. So it's in all our interest that they come back less traumatized, less violent, more productive, skilled, educated, etc. And the whole idea is to make people better, build them up, a redemptive and rehabilitative approach instead of just warehousing and making people, actually become worse over time. That's the goal. That's what the states have done, and that's what we want to see happen here, because this will help keep communities safer, law enforcement safer, save lots of money, save lives, and be better for society overall. We'll be reducing recidivism rates. And recidivism obviously is returning to prison after you've been in, repeat offenders, and that often happens because people going into prison don't have skills or abilities or have issues that aren't dealt with, whether it's a drug issue or anger management. And then when they get out, they find because of their criminal record they can't get jobs because they don't have skills, they can't get housing, etc. So the whole idea is these programs will make people less dangerous, more productive, more fulfilled, and come back into our societies better citizens so they can be part of the American dream and be with their families and be in their communities. And that's the goal. And we've seen that in places like Texas, where in the past 10 to 15 years they've closed now 8 prisons, saved over $4 billion in taxpayer money, and have a crime rate that hasn't been this low since 1967. Another aspect of the prison reform bill is that it will forbid the shackling of pregnant women when they're giving birth to their children, which we think is a good thing as well. I think everybody would agree with that. There's also just situations where people over time, if they as they progress, like I said, they can use the earned time credits if they're low or minimal risk to do some of their sentence in home confinement or a halfway house, which will help them reintegrate more successfully, we think, into society as well. There's a lot of misinformation out there about. You may have been referring to that. People are talking about this will benefit violent individuals or sex offenders, and that is not the case. Definitely not the intent, and it's not the case. The risk assessment that will be done by the Bureau of Prison officials will have to be signed off by the warden. Anybody who has committed a sex offense, this is a sex offender or has a violent felony, they will not be able to, they'll be able potentially to take programs, but they won't be able to get into a halfway house or home confinement. They're going to have to serve their sentence. However, they may be able to access some of the programmatic activity, which, again, would be positive. They'll do it in prison because, as I mentioned earlier, 95% of the people are getting out of, are coming out of the prison back into society, and we want them coming back better than they went in. So
Okay,
that's that part of the bill. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I've been talking too much.
No, Mark, it's fantastic, and we need this information because there's a lot of information out there, and most people aren't like you and I, where we're kind of immersed in this and we're thinking about this and looking at it all day. Most people have regular jobs where they don't look at this, and so there have been some blips where, Mark, I was early on with this because I know one of the White House staffers who's been in with the president and Jared Kushner and others working on this. And so I had heads up that this was coming, and I was so excited. But I've also seen that there's been some law enforcement pushback. I've seen some articles by people that I respect saying this isn't what it looks like. This isn't what it sounds like. This isn't what we need. And I've also heard word that some staffers on the Hill and even some people from the White House are shopping around a different version of the bill because they're concerned about some things that were raised by Senator Tom Cotton. So what do you say to those kind of detractors? I don't see any malice in what they're saying, but I do see them as being opposed to the First Step Act. How do you deal with that criticism?
Read the bill and listen to Mike Lee, not Tom Cotton. That'd be my advice to people.
We've had him on the show. We like Mike Lee.
Yeah, and listen to Tim Scott. So here's my take on it. Some of the Tom Cotton has his beliefs and has his view on things, but what he's bringing up is actually not what is in the bill. It's not the intent, and what he's been doing, though, is leveraging or exploiting one of the big issues in our criminal justice system, if you think about it. We don't know how many federal criminal laws we have in this country. Congress has asked the Department of Justice, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, to specifically enumerate and tabulate how many federal criminal laws we have. They've said they can't do it. It's like counting, the stars in the sky. And so what's happened is there are a lot of broad exclusions in the bill for violent offenders, sex offenders, that type of thing. And then what I think Senator Cotton has done is found some laws that may not be covered by the specific exclusion and trying to say, see, it's not covering all these things. It's going to benefit violent people or sex offenders. That isn't the case. That gets back to the risk assessment. The risk assessment, which will have to be done with everybody coming in to see what risk they have, what elements they have of risk, and then getting them in the right situation. If you have a violent offense or if you have a sex offense, you will not be able to access the programs in a way that would allow you to serve part of your sentence in a halfway house or on home confinement. You'll have to serve it in prison. They're trying to tamp that down more if they can, but part of the problem is with our criminal justice system in general, there's so much stuff out there as far as how many laws there are, and I think that's one of the things that Senator Cotton has been focused on is that. He's also been, I don't know if he realizes this or not, but one of the better promoters of the Clinton crime bill that most people see as really a failure and it devastated particularly communities of color in the past, disproportionately in the past 20 or 30, 20 plus years that it's been in effect. And, Senator Cotton is against the reforms, the sentencing reforms that most people are in favor of that have been added by the Senate, the common sense reforms that they're not in any way designed to benefit violent criminals. I mean, the whole idea is there are some people who get caught up in the system who don't need to be in so long with these mandatory minimums, and the sentencing reforms that have been proposed by the Senate that President Trump and the Fraternal Order of Police and other law enforcement groups support, those are the ones we support as well. We think it'll make it a more just system, a more fair system, and we think it'll also help save money in the long term where people who aren't a threat to public safety aren't locked up for decades. So I think, whatever reason, I'm sure Mr. Cotton has his reasons for what he's doing, but in a lot of ways, I think what he's really doing is working against the president's agenda, working against the agenda of the FOP, who obviously they're the largest police union in the country. They're going to be very focused on their constituents, on their law enforcement, the beat cops that are out there every day, who I think are heroes trying to deal with all these issues. They're clearly focused on public safety. So, what I think that Senator Cotton's doing, unfortunately, is really trying to keep the worst aspects of the Clinton crime bill in place that everybody else, including the Clintons, I think, have said, well, they overshot and didn't do the right thing. And if that happens, and if he's able to defeat the president's agenda and in the First Step Act, then we need to rename this the Clinton-Cotton crime bill.
Wow. So I understand why the Clinton crime bill was so tough, because communities of color that you mentioned, the people in those communities were experiencing an outsized amount of crime, and it was destroying the lives of so many people. And so they cried out for assistance. They asked to be relieved of the criminals in their midst, but it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction that really, it just went so far. So it did help in some ways, because a lot of people went to jail and a lot of criminals and petty criminals were completely removed, which lowered the crime rate. But then the ramifications of that were people who could have been rehabilitated in a shorter amount of time ended up spending decades in prison for things that now, they would get a slap on the wrist or, pay a lawyer to get them off with a fine. And they were kind of made criminals. I mean, many people go into prison for their first offense and they're not really full-blown criminals. But when they come out, they are, because of the way that the prison system is. And so I'm kind of in the middle, because I can tell you, Mark, I'm one of those people where if you've committed a violent crime, I don't really see any reason why you should be out among the rest of us. And I do understand that a lot of this comes from socioeconomically disadvantaged communities where people haven't been taught how to behave, how to live with others, how to handle their anger. But if they were taught something like that, if they were actually rehabilitated, then it would be a much easier thing to kind of get your head around these people coming back out into society. We do see lots of studies have been done, Mark, where we're seeing where people who violently offend and are given a wrist slap go on to violently reoffend, but they step it up some. So they actually kill more than one person, where they escalate to rape and sexual assault and things like that, in addition to killing people. So we do need to keep those individuals behind bars. So you're assuring me that this First Step Act is that happy middle where first-time offenders, nonviolent offenders, people who actually are great candidates for rehabilitation are following the model of these states where they've closed prisons and they've done a great job of keeping their crime rates low, while violent offenders will be sent where they belong and they will have to stay there, but they can be rehabilitated in prison.
Yes, that's what I'm telling you, and that's my understanding. And I think that if you look at in Arkansas, they're doing a lot of the things that reforms that Senator Cotton is advocating against in the bill. I mean, they're doing diversionary programs, they're doing prison reform and rehabilitation programs. They're also using these credits, earned time credits. And in Arkansas, as I understand it, everybody is eligible for the earned time credits except people who have life sentences. So these have been pretty much adopted by many of the states with great success, and that's the whole idea. And you laid it out perfectly. I mean, my point of view, really, Stacey, is that when our government starts to wage war on things like poverty and drugs, it's really missing the mark, right? I mean, you look at what happened in the war on drugs. To your point, you're exactly right. There were some people who needed to be dealt with and dealt with severely, particularly high-level offenders, violent offenders. But then there were people who, basically had a mental health issue or a public health issue like addiction, or, maybe they lived in a neighborhood or a community where they couldn't find a job and they made a bad decision to sell drugs. Well, we treated everybody the same, basically. And that isn't a way that our government, our system should work. We should do it based on the individual situation. And obviously we have sentencing laws that address the issues. But these mandatory minimums for high-level offenders, sure, I think that makes sense. But for a lot of other people who got caught up in it, it didn't make sense. And to your point, someone goes into prison, even if it's just a nonviolent offender, they're going to come out probably worse than they went in. We're trying to reverse that trend, and it's not easy, but make people coming out better than they went in. And if we don't pass this bill, we're just going to keep saying the same thing about what's going on, that we have too many people coming back into prison, recidivism rates are high, we're spending billions of dollars and things don't seem to change. It'll be our own fault. It'll be the fault of, the U.S. Senate for not passing this law. Well, and we've got a lot of law enforcement on board. We've got, broad coalitions across the board.
We're at the end of our segment, and I just want to say thank you so much, Mark Holden, Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Koch Industries. Thank you for your time today, sir. Excellent to speak to you. We'll be back with more right after this.
Physical activity is the new trend. It's not a bad thing unless it has brought a sense of vanity in your life. 2 years ago, I was not happy with the number on the scale nor how I looked. I've never been a huge person, but I was, as the old folks would say, healthy. I joined a gym, gained a personal trainer, even changed some of my eating habits. The Lord checked me one day and in my spirit said, "Why are you disgusted with yourself? Be healthy, take care of the temple I've loaned you, but do it because you want to honor this body, which is your responsibility while on this earth." I said, "You better let me know, Abba." Psalms 139 verse 14 says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." 15 pounds down, I know that even if I was to never look like Serena Williams with those nice framed, worked out arms, I am wonderfully made in his image, and so are you. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
The New Yorker recently reported that a mother of a would-be politician was struggling with breast cancer. Even so, her son seemed too busy to see her. Finally, as she was preparing to kill herself through assisted suicide, she left a message on his phone. "Hope you're well. Next Wednesday will be the last day for me. Hope you can make it." The son did make it before she died and cooked her a last meal before giving his California mother the lethal drugs to kill herself. At the time, it was a felony to use assisted suicide. She died in San Francisco, where her son was on the board of supervisors and had taken an oath to uphold the law. This less than attentive son is Gavin Newsom, and he was just elected governor of California.
For more information, visit our website at lifeissues.org. And stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. Every 2 years at this time, I launch into one of my favorite activities. It's a game of Who's That? For months, I pored over pictures of congressional candidates. I've read about them in news articles, seen them in interviews, but you're not really sure who to look for until they're actually elected, discerning each of the more than 90 new House members as they descend on Washington for freshman orientation. As a reporter who covers Capitol Hill, you may think you've memorized the visages of these freshman classes, but you can't truly digest who's who until you see them in person. Of course, everyone knows Democratic New York Representative-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but just how many of you can pick out Republican Congresswoman-elect Carol Miller of West Virginia? If you're really good at this who's who, you'd know the delegate-elect Michael San Nicolas. He's from Guam. A few freshmen are easier to pick out, like Democratic Florida Representative-elect Donna Shalala. She served for 8 years as President Clinton's Health and Human Services Secretary, or Vice President Pence's brother, GOP Indiana Congressman-elect Greg Pence. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The facts are the facts, and yes, the production did increase throughout his term, but frankly, he had nothing to do with it. This was production in states like Texas, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Colorado, North Dakota in particular, and these were all state decisions made with industry applications for permits. The federal government had no role, and if anything, he was trying to frustrate the efforts by taking federal lands off of the availability list, putting them out, just no more drilling. He shut down the Gulf of Mexico for a period of 6 months, changed the regulations from an average of 60 to 80 pages per permit to 600 to 800 pages per permit. He also never approved the Keystone XL pipeline after dangling all the potential customers for 8 years. And it was in the 8th year when he said no Keystone pipeline. And so I would say that he was not a leader when it comes to energy, other than the Clean Air Act or the Clean Power Plan, where he tried to remake the power generation industry without involving Congress, and the Paris Accords, again, without involving Congress. So he tried to do a lot, but it was not in the direction of the kind of energy that President Trump is working on.
Wow. So this is the president, actually, or former President Obama, actually taking credit for what is, he had nothing to do with it. And so this is former Shell oil president saying Obama had nothing to do with the increase in fuel production. And it's kind of amazing because one of the things that President Obama has been really good at is popping up like a little whack-a-mole and taking credit for things that he had nothing to do with. And this is another of those instances. So now I want to pivot over to the title of the show is Drag Queen Story Hour. And why is it an actual thing? Because drag queens have an agenda, because they don't like the fact that most people don't see them as normal and mainstream. And the way that they want to go about making themselves normal and mainstream is to show up and mainstream themselves to children so that they can normalize the behavior and make kids think that this is something that they want to engage in as well. So here we are. We've got this guy. He's usually dressed in drag when he does story hours, when he does shows at clubs and things like that. And he's at this city council meeting, and there are a bunch of people there who are really upset that he's being allowed to do these story hours dressed as a woman. And he is saying, I'm going to keep doing them because I want to groom these kids. And I come in on the audio at the place where he's really kind of exposing his agenda. He spends the first 3 or 4 minutes of his comments talking about how he's not trying to change anything. He's not a scary person. He's not someone that the parents should fear. He's not trying to change parents' minds or kids' minds. But then right in the middle, he says, I'm not trying to change anyone's mind, except when I am, which is when I'm doing story hour, which is why I'm doing it, because we want to groom kids not to stigmatize people who are dressed in drag. Here he is talking about it. It's number 3.
I just think that it is implorable of some of the opinions that I've seen and some of the looks I received here tonight. The eyes that people give you whenever they think that you are the one that's in support of this event is truly disgusting. And I am not here to obviously change anyone's views about me, but I'm here to let you know that this event is something that's going to be very beautiful. And for the children and the people that support it are going to realize that this is going to be the grooming of the next generation. We are trying to groom the next generation to not see the way that they just did. And just because I said that, you heard the little plur of people behind me. It's disgusting. We are trying to teach people to be tolerable, to be patient, to be loving. And the fact of the matter is that I'm standing right here and there's probably 50 people behind me looking at me with daggers, wishing that I would probably die in a car wreck whenever I leave here. It's truly implorable. And that is what we're trying to do with Drag Queen Storytime. We're trying to raise people to be loving and caring individuals. And I really hope that this event is going to do that for not only just the children at this event, but children in the future. Thank you.
So, first of all, he doesn't know what the word deplorable is. He calls it implorable. And that would be like the least of my concerns. It is the least of my concerns. But we have someone here who has an agenda. And first off, we know that whether they change the DSM or not, whether they make this a big deal or not about it not being a mental illness anymore. Remember, homosexuality used to be listed as a mental illness, a disorder. So did being transgender, dressing in drag, body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia. All of these things were, they were disorders. They were mental illnesses. So the fact that they are no longer listed as such doesn't change that. I could say I'm a unicorn. I'm still a human being, a woman. That I can't change that by saying it or having my body adjusted. It is what it is. So we're talking about a man who is mentally ill and parents willingly giving their children time to spend with this mentally ill man who spends his time dressed as a woman, but not a normal woman, an extreme representation of what a woman is. And he is reveling in his sickness and wanting to spread that out for other people. He wants to make other people experience what he is going through. He wants to have them approve of it and have them accept it. And he wants to do this with children because he figures adults already have their biases. And there are some people you can see in the video. There are people in the room who look pretty miffed, like their faces are clearly, they're upset. And the reason they're upset is because it's one thing for you to be mentally ill and have a whole lot of issues. It's another thing for you to basically say, I need access to your kids. And there's so many unwittingly stupid parents out there who think, well, the drag queen story hour is just something fun and it teaches my child tolerance. No, you are going to be held accountable for that. One day you're going to have to explain why you thought it was good to give a mentally ill man dressed as a woman access to your small, impressionable child. That is going to be something you have to answer for. So it's understandable that people are so upset. All I can think of is how important it is for us to stand up against this. And it's been a theme this week where we've talked in our encouragement segment at the beginning of the show during Daily Confession. We've talked about how important it is for us to stand up to these terrible, terrible things that are going on in our culture. And so it makes people unpopular. And what he was trying to do when he was talking about the people in the room who were giving him daggers, he's talking about their disapproval. And there is no law written where people have to approve of your behavior. I've experienced it before. People who don't like my political ideology have seen me in public and they've shot me daggers. They've given me looks. They've whispered. That is their disapproval. I do not have a constitutional right not to have people show their displeasure at my views. I have a right to be safe and not to be physically harmed. And I have a right to leave any situation, not be held hostage, to be forced to listen to people say what they don't like. They have a right to say whatever they want to say. I have a right to decide not to hear it, as this guy does. But what he's playing a really interesting game, which is let me point out that they disapprove and let me point to their disapproval as the good reason why I should be allowed access to small kids. Notice that. He's saying I should have access to small kids to teach them not to have the same disapproval as the rest of the people in this room. Never mind the fact that the people in the room who have the children, because he doesn't have any, they have a right not to have their kids exposed to him. They have a right not to have their public library, which is taxpayer funded, espousing this ideology. And so if there are dissenters, if there are people who don't want it, the thing to do is for the drag queen to rent out a space and have story hour in there and invite parents to bring their kids. So only the kids that parents want to see this content, kids whose parents are fools, can take their children there and have them exposed. But other kids shouldn't be exposed. Kids who just happen to be in the library picking out books, kids who happen to be there on a field trip, kids who, as soon as kids hear someone reading a story, the first thing they do is they run over and they sit down. They should not be exposed to this in a public library. Now, as I'm saying this, there's some person who's seen the title of the show, they're angry, they're probably on there right now typing like that little meme, the little sparks flying off their fingers on the computer, and that's fine. But we're talking about protecting kids. And so it's kind of ingenious the way he used this venue to not only defend himself, but to kind of mark the parents who were there who didn't want him to do it as the reason why he should get to do what he wants to do. I find it absolutely crazy that this is a thing. Like every time you think, all the issues we're dealing with in this country, all of the problems that have manifested and we're trying to work our way through. And this is where we have our energies being placed on parents having to take time off from work to go to, city council meetings and places like that to have these discussions around drag queens reading stories to small preschool age kids, to school age kids. It's just, it's tough to take. So now I want to flip over, and I've had a few stories like about, there's been some real developments in the war on Planned Parenthood, which it's real, and we're in it, and we're happy to be waging it. And we're also going to talk about Starbucks blocking pornography in their 14,000 plus stores. If they deserve credit for anything, it's for this. One Planned Parenthood affiliate now makes over $100 million killing babies in abortion. So there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that Planned Parenthood's share of U.S. abortions has increased in 2015 because they've kept the number consistent of abortions that they do, increasing only slightly. But the number of abortions performed in this country is down from a high in the 90s of almost 2 million a year to a record low in 2015 of 638,169 abortions. That used to be the number for all of the private clinic abortions, and then Planned Parenthood was doing about 350,000 extra. Now, that's total 638,169 reported to the CDC across the entire country, but so the abortion rate has dropped. It's great news. It's a hallelujah moment. We can go into the weekend knowing that the pro-life message and this new pro-life generation of millennials who literally know that a baby is a baby is a baby from the moment of conception because their parents have been putting up the ultrasound pictures on the refrigerator or taping them to the bulletin board. And as soon as they knew their mom was expecting, they knew there was a baby in there because of technology. That is the grace of God that we have lowered the abortion rate to such a degree. Lila Rose, Live Action, the personhood movement, so many people who have worked so hard. This is the fruit of that labor, and it is good to be walking in the land seeing this number go down. But the same year that we saw a record low of abortions, Planned Parenthood reported performing 323,999 abortions. So then when the number of abortions shrunk to 638,000, so 2014 it was 652, 2015 it was 638,000. Planned Parenthood their abortion business actually expanded. So their clinics actually did about 5,000 more abortions over 2015, meaning that they did 50% of all the abortions in this country. Remember, they used to do a third. Now they do 50%. So the overall abortion rate has gone down. Their share of the U.S. abortion market has increased. They continue to lie that abortion is only 3% of what they do, but why else do they exist? And in Planned Parenthood Marmonte, headquartered in San Jose, California, their last federal Form 990 showed that they had a total income of $109.7 million, one facility. Now, Planned Parenthood of Marmonte, well, one parent over a bunch of facilities. Planned Parenthood of Marmonte manages and operates 35 facilities, 34 in California, 1 in Nevada. The Nevada facility does not do surgical or medical abortions, but unlike most other states, taxpayers in California pay for most abortions in the state. Thus, the 26 abortion facilities run by PPMM committed 17,884 abortions and receive a great deal of taxpayer money. They make $8.9 million from direct payments from customers, but they receive $70.4 million of taxpayer money. Taxpayer money funding these abortions. That is why we can never stop asking our congresspeople to have the bones to actually make good on their promises and defund Planned Parenthood. Not $1 of federal taxes or local or state taxes should ever go to an abortion provider. Abortion is not health care. It is not a medically necessary procedure in 98% of the cases. And in the 2% of cases where it is medically necessary, it should be done in a hospital by a licensed physician who not only has admitting privileges, but is a surgeon. That is the truth of what we're doing right now, which is 98% of all abortions are for convenience. They're for contraception. So look, y'all know how I feel about this. And y'all know we only have 2 spots to occupy. You can be for pro-life movement, for the life of every human being from conception until natural death, or you can support basically it's sacrificing babies on the altar of sexual progression of basically what do I want to do with my body, and I'll do it, and I won't take the consequences into account, we'll be held accountable for whichever position we take. As a nation, we're receiving judgment right now for the fact that we fund abortions with taxpayer dollars. And that judgment will continue and escalate until we defund Planned Parenthood and no longer force Americans to support abortion with their taxpayer dollars. Until that happens, we will continue to receive the punishment that is meted out, because God is not mocked. He does not look over sin. He doesn't overlook it. He doesn't say, oh, that's okay for now, or, oh, she just wanted to have free, fun sex, and so therefore that abortion, I'm not going to count that against her. I'm not going to count that against the taxpayers. I'm not going to count that against America. That's just not how this thing works. We have to stand up against it, and we have to elect pro-life leaders who will go into the houses of Congress and put a stop to this funding. But great news to see that number go down. May it go down to 0 in our lifetime. If you are leaving us now, great weekend to you. God bless you from the heartland. If you're sticking around, we'll be back with more, and onenewsnow.com. Stay there.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
You only want to donate to biblically sound organizations. So as a federal or state employee, why not choose the American Family Association Combined Federal Campaign Designation 12037? Of the organizations on the CFC list, AFA is one of the few standing for you and your family. By choosing 12037, you help make it possible for us to continue.
Truth. Wisdom. Empowerment. Urban Family Talk. A ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Donald Trump has been briefed about the earthquake that rocked Anchorage, causing damage to buildings and infrastructure. The president is in Argentina at the Group of 20 summit, but White House spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders tweeted that he is monitoring the reports of damage. More now from Jessica Rosenthal.
Some roads are badly damaged. Shelved items hit the floor, and the power's gone out in many spots. Part of the Eagle River Bridge has collapsed. Ben English was on the 10th floor of his office building when the earthquake hit this morning.
So the shaking was pretty extreme. It's exacerbated a little bit when you're high up in a building. There's pretty significant damage in the building.
A tsunami warning issued after the quake was canceled. The seismologists say liquefaction in the ground in this area makes the ground looser and can enhance the severity of shaking. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
A grand jury has indicted a former Dallas police officer for murder in the killing of her unarmed neighbor when she says she mistakenly went to his apartment rather than her own and shot him. The former officer is white. The man killed was black. His death thrust Dallas into the national conversation on the intersection of race and law enforcement, a dialogue revived by the high-profile trials of officers charged with murder in police shootings. Was he a brave martyr or a fool? That's the question everyone is asking about missionary John Chow, who was reportedly killed trying to evangelize a lost people group on a lone island.
He had to hire local fishermen to illegally cross the naval blockade separating North Sentinel Island from the rest of the world. Only his waterproof Bible stopped an arrow from its deadly task on his first visit. On his second, John Allen Chow died at the hands of the lost tribe he came to save. Was he crazy, impulsive, naive, or perhaps walking in faith exactly where God had sent him? We're learning more about the 26-year-old and what drove him to that remote island. Mary Ho leads All Nations, the missions group that sent Chow.
He really felt that this was his life call, to take the love and the goodness of Jesus Christ to the North Sentinelese. Since then, every single decision he has made has been to thoroughly prepare himself for this life call. He graduated from Oral Roberts University. He majored in sports medicine, in health, in exercise science. Later, he trained as a wilderness EMT, got trained in linguistics, cultural anthropology.
Chow was willing to lay down his life to save the lost tribe from going to hell. It's a theology not everyone agrees with, but Southern Seminary President Dr. Richard Land says it's the wrong question.
The question shouldn't be, are these people all going to hell? It should be, why haven't we gone and told them about Jesus?
John Allen Chow tried. Land says that makes him a hero of the faith. I'm Steve Jordahl.
New York's Attorney General is investigating a Marriott data breach that may have affected 500 million people. That would put it among the largest data breaches on record. Last year's startling Equifax hack affected more than 145 million people. Marriott says unauthorized access to data at former Starwood hotels, which Marriott acquired 2 years ago, has been taking place since 2014. In final news this hour, the beloved Christmas classic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is being targeted as a problematic tale. Fox's Mike Gunzelman explains.
The most famous reindeer of all.
The beloved and classic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is coming under attack for being, quote, problematic because it suggests bullying as well as bigotry.
Won't you guide my sleigh tonight?
It will be an honor, sir.
The Huffington Post highlighted people's complaints about the famous reindeer, one person tweeting, quote, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, teaching kids since 1964 that your peers will only accept your differences if you can provide them with some kind of service. Now, many people coming out on the other side saying that this is just plain ridiculous, including Donald Trump Jr., who quoted the article and tweeted, liberalism is a disease.
Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Did you know Operation Christmas Child is not only about evangelism through a simple shoebox gift, but also about discipleship? Millions of children will receive shoebox gifts, and then many will have an opportunity to go through a 12-lesson discipleship course, The Greatest Journey. Operation Christmas Child is able to train teachers, provide all of the materials, and a New Testament for only $6 per child. To learn more, go to SamaritansPurse.org/OCC. That's SamaritansPurse.org/OCC.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
My name's Ellen Pontiff. I'm actually going to be one of the drag queens reading for Drag Queen Storytime. So apparently to a lot of people in this room, I'm the big boogeyman.
This investigation is a complete failure. That is why he is now focusing on these side characters to accuse them of lying or perjury, because this is where we are. This is the pathetic state of Mueller's handling of this.
The well-connected can do pretty much whatever they want. They can lie to the Congress with impunity, and they do. They can lobby for foreign governments without bothering to register, and they do. None of this, by the way, is a defense of Michael Cohen. That guy's a creep. He may very well wind up in jail. But if Cohen does wind up in jail, let's hope he's just the first in a long series of prosecutions. If the law is applied to Michael Cohen, then it has to be applied to people who have lied about things that actually matter.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here. Just a heads up, I am the keynote speaker at tomorrow night's Illinois GOP Christmas party, and it's going to be pretty fun. I'm going to be speaking about some really fascinating discussion. I'm going to have quite a bit to say, which you're probably thinking, what's different about that? So I'll be there, and it will be a really wonderful time. I'm so glad I'm going to get the opportunity to speak to that group a second time. I've spoken to them once a couple years ago, so it'll be fun. This hour on the show, we're going to be really just moving through the program. It's an interesting group of information that we have. We're going to discuss the legal accounting of Comey, Brennan, and Clapper, people who are getting away with lying to Congress while we're seeing Michael Cohen getting prosecuted for lying to Congress. Isn't that a huge double standard? Why does he get prosecuted and no one else does? We're going to have some information on that. And the military's role in border security. This is important because people are acting as if the military's never been sent to the border before. Not only has the military been sent to the border before, it's been numerous times, time after time after time, that the military has been sent to the border. It is not abnormal. It is actually a part of what the military is expected to do, which is maintain the national defense. And so we'll talk about that as well. Right now, I want to delve into Tucker Carlson and the endless flawed Mueller probe, exposing this huge double standard. I love it when Tucker Carlson just gets into his zone and kind of he settles in. He does it on a nightly basis, but sometimes it's just so good. And this is one of those times where he just settles in and he picks something apart so completely. You're just struck by it. Here he is in number 4.
Let's consider what we have just learned about how Washington works. Apparently, it's now an enforceable felony to lie to the U.S. Congress. On one level, that is good news. We should take our own laws seriously. Functional countries do that. Nations in decline set up sanctuary cities and ignore their own borders. Nor is it implausible that Michael Cohen might have broken this law or really any other law. Nobody who knows him is shocked by the allegation. If Cohen was accused of running a cannibalism ring, you'd have to at least take the charge seriously. Anything is possible with that guy. So 3 cheers for law and order. The problem is, if you're going to enforce statutes, you have to enforce them fairly and evenly. The law has to apply to everyone. Otherwise, it's not really the law. It's a political weapon. Michael Cohen is facing 5 years in prison for telling Congress something that he knew was false. How often does that happen in Washington? If you watch C-SPAN, you know the answer. Constantly. All the time. There are almost never consequences, by the way. According to one study, between the Second World War and 2007, a total of only 6 people were convicted of lying to Congress. 6 people in 60 years. In other words, the law is not enforced, and that's why people break it so often.
And so, since that's why people break it so often, you would think that either prosecutions would ramp up considerably or that they would just rescind the law. You can lie to Congress if you want to. The fact that Hillary Clinton's never been prosecuted for it, that Clapper, Comey, so many others have never, in fact, that's what he did next, and we're not going to listen to that, but Tucker Carlson played some audio of James Clapper lying to Congress, knowingly lying to Congress, and he's never been prosecuted. Now, there's some kind of back channel online where some people are saying the reason we haven't seen the declassification of documents is because the president's keeping them in his back pocket, because if the Democrats decide to come for him with harassment of the president through investigations and subpoenas, that he will then declassify the documents and it will send everything into a tailspin. Also, that he'll be having his acting attorney general, prosecute Clapper, Comey, Brennan for lying to Congress and other things, abuses of the FISA court, et cetera, et cetera. And that very well may be the case. I can tell you if that's what they're going to do. But I do know this. When a nation has people in charge that refuse to equally prosecute the law, to treat citizens equally, it creates a kind of a wind tunnel where people start to get sucked in. And, Tucker Carlson just said that Cohen's a jerk or what have you. I don't know that. I don't know that Cohen is a jerk. I don't know that he deserves prosecution for stuff he did, 10 or 15 years ago, and he's only being prosecuted because he worked with the president. I don't know that I buy into that. And I'm all about people being brought to justice, but it is the same. It's even worse, actually, because he's losing his livelihood. He's losing his reputation. He's losing everything. It's extra bad to me when you see someone who's done something and they're getting away with it, as Comey, Clapper, and Brennan are doing, and so many others, Clinton, everybody in the Clinton orbit, they get away with it, but other people are forced to, not just pay the price, but pay the most severe of prices. That's not supposed to be how this thing works. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if the president actually comes out swinging, because the Democrats are going to move forward with investigations. They're going to call them oversight, but they are going to try to end the president's tenure. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm not covering the plea deal and how horrible it is for the president, it's because it's another big nothing burger. You've got Mueller. He was supposed to be the pit bull who could get his prey. He has not been able to take down the president. And so these last gasp little, indictments of Cohen and others in Trump world, they're not going to result in the president being impeached. So there really isn't much more to say beyond that. Now I want to talk about Starbucks making this. This is like, I'm surprised. And it's not that I'm surprised because Starbucks doesn't kind of paint themselves as this family-friendly place. They do. In fact, when they're not blaring the loudest Rihanna CD they can find, Starbucks is actually really friendly to kids because they have things that kids can buy to eat while they're there and their parents are getting coffee. They also have the smaller cups for the hot cocoa, so a kid can get a hot cocoa from there while their parents are getting coffee. A lot of moms, when they're out doing their errands and what have you with their preschoolers, the kids end up in Starbucks and they end up getting something from the menu there. And I believe that's the decision they're making. They're saying hipsters and college students and single people who want to watch pornography in their shops using their Wi-Fi are taking away opportunities for parents with kids who are much more reliable repeat customers who don't need Wi-Fi access. They're just there to buy stuff and consume Starbucks products, that they're a better bet for the long-term viability of the company. And it's a smart bet to make. And I'm not saying that married people don't engage in watching pornography, but in public spaces, you're not going to find married people with reputations doing that. You're going to find single people who are using the Starbucks for Wi-Fi. So here's the story here. It's over at cnsnews.com. They have 28,916 Starbucks locations worldwide. 14,451 of those locations are in the United States. Now, that's some market saturation for you if you think about it. 50 states, how many major cities do we have? You have 100 major cities. Think about how many Starbucks there are. Sometimes, like in D.C., there's actually, you can be at one Starbucks and look, like stand in front of it and look to your left and see another Starbucks on the corner. Because the blocks in D.C. are big, but they're not so big you can't see the next Starbucks. Honestly, that's how many they have. They have full saturation. So starting in 2019, Starbucks has announced that they will provide pornography-free Wi-Fi in their U.S. stores. It's happening because of pressure over many years from a coalition led by the internet safety group Enough is Enough. They go by the acronym EIE. In an email to Business Insider, a Starbucks representative said that the company had identified a solution to block pornography in its U.S. stores, which it would implement in 2019, over 2 years after the coffee chain initially said it would do so. 6 years after it began filtering Wi-Fi in its stores in the UK. Well, to ensure the third place remains safe and welcoming to all, we have identified a solution to prevent this content from being viewed from within our stores, and will begin introducing it to our U.S. locations in 2019. So the third place designation refers to Starbucks' policy that aims to make the coffee shop a place between work and home, where everyone is welcome, whether or not they buy anything. Starbucks' decision to block porn on Wi-Fi came a few days after EIE published a press release calling the company out for breaking its promise. They launched a petition that has already gathered more than 26,000 signatures. EIE President and CEO Donna Rice Hughes told CNSNews.com that while she's hopeful Starbucks will follow through on its pledge, its failure to do so earlier was very disappointing. She says, our response is that this is good news. It's good news that we also heard from Starbucks 2.5 years ago. So this time we're going to verify that they actually do this, and we will give them a big praise and applause once they have implemented the filtering and not before. In the meantime, she says that EIE will keep the pressure up on Starbucks and works towards getting all of corporate America that offers free public Wi-Fi to block pornography, including the airline industry, trains, stadiums, malls, and large restaurants. In Monday's press release, Hughes demanded that Starbucks do the right thing to keep children safe. Now, I want to just add as a caveat, you know that prison inmates can watch pornography? And when it got cut off recently, I saw a story that they were like protesting because they want their access to pornography back. Can you imagine what those inmates will be like after spending years in prison watching pornography? Come on. I mean, these are no-brainer type decisions that I can't believe we have to have organized groups to shame these companies into doing the right thing. So EIE has been fighting to convince Starbucks and other large companies to filter their Wi-Fi since 2014 when they launched their Safe Wi-Fi campaign. In response, McDonald's established filters in 2016. Chick-fil-A and Panera Bread have been filtering their Wi-Fi for years, and the campaign is backed by several conservative organizations, including Alliance Defending Freedom, Concerned Women for America, Family Research Council, and your very own, home of yours truly, American Family Association, the parent organization of American Family Radio. That's right. This is a victory for us. We got to wait and see if they do it. Now, if we can get them to block the pornography, maybe we could get them to soften up a little bit and stop punishing lawful gun owners by saying we're not allowed in the stores when we're carrying concealed. Because what they need is lawful gun owners sitting in their stores, using their clean Wi-Fi, drinking their coffee and other drinks, and sitting around just minding their own business just in case a wackadoodle shows up. Good guy with a gun, right? Well, let's hope that they take this first step. I'm willing to back off a little bit on the 2A thing for a few minutes to see them do this and to give them some kudos. It's hard to find a corporation that's willing to do the right thing. And of course, it took public shaming. But once they've made the decision and they actually execute on it, we should give them some credit where it's due. And, it's hard with Starbucks because they're so far on the left, but they are a huge part of our culture now. And we can't ignore them. We can't act like they don't exist. Their third place stores actually have a huge cultural impact. And there's a whole culture, a Starbucks culture that is now a part of American culture. And so this activity, it's needed. And I'm happy to see them at least make the statement again that they're going to do it. So we'll see what actually happens. If they don't do it, we'll have to take them to task and shame them some more, won't we? But right now, we're going to go to the break. When we get back, we're going to be talking about Mueller and Comey and Brennan and Clapper, et cetera, right after this.
Every day in preborn centers across the country, young women in crisis find refuge. Here's Roxy, nurse director for preborn at the Crisis Pregnancy Center in Southern California.
A lot of them come to us and they feel rejected, they feel alone, they're in a crisis situation, they don't know what to do, they don't know where to start. We believe that sharing the compassionate love of Jesus Christ is what really makes what we do work.
Through love and compassion, young women facing tough situations get to meet Jesus Christ and their unborn baby on ultrasound.
And I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds, and you'll receive a story and a picture of babies' lives that were spared. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Does plagiarism matter to Christians? That is a question Dr. Warren Throckmorton asked in a recent column. I had him and Mary DeMuth on the Point of View radio talk show to discuss some of the problems that have surfaced in Christian publishing. In the secular world, plagiarism is a big deal. In his article, he documents cases where people have lost their jobs or received severe sanctions both in the newsroom and in the academy. And if a professor catches a student engaged in plagiarism, we know that student faces severe consequences as well. Warren Throckmorton isn't convinced that the Christian world takes the issue seriously given the response to a number of high-profile cases of Christian authors lifting material from other books and calling it their own. Sometimes there's a legal settlement, but often the issue is greeted with a yawn with no further action taken. Mary DeMuth believes that one of the reasons for this problem is the Christian celebrity culture. Big-name authors bring in lots of revenue to Christian publishers. At the same time, there is pressure for authors to produce books quickly. Interns or associates they hire to write much of the material may not be careful about what they lift from other sources, and sometimes the authors themselves are borrowing concepts from other authors without appropriate citation. Warren Throckmorton also believes that if we started demanding that authors write their own material, ghostwriters and researchers would be out of work, and fewer books would be published by these authors each year. We might expect that the Christian world would hold to a higher standard in publishing than the secular world, but the lack of response from Christians on social media about some of these cases of plagiarism suggests that we aren't holding authors to that standard. The solution, of course, is for those of us in the Christian public to hold them accountable. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Eric Holder was the first district attorney general to be held in contempt of Congress. Lois Lerner pled the Fifth Amendment. And we don't know what's going to happen with the Obama FBI, CIA, NSC, and DOJ officials because the verdict's not out on Bruce Orr. 8 to 10 FBI officials have already been retired or reassigned or may be facing indictment. The saga of James Comey and John Brennan, James Clapper is not over because we're looking at a situation where a presidential candidate hired a foreign national to find dirt on her opponent, and that dossier was seeded among top officials of the Obama administration. We haven't had an accounting, ethical, or legal yet, and it's coming.
Welcome back to the program. That is actually Victor Davis Hanson, and he was talking about what a lot of us have. It's just kind of in the back of your mind, isn't it? Do you sometimes you see the Mueller story bubble up in the news, and you think, oh, interesting. Okay, so they're going to catch this guy for basically intentionally deflecting the story away from the Trump Tower meeting. So this is a Trump Tower that they were going to build in Moscow. And to say that this is any different than any of the other myriad number of properties that Trump has built around the world, it's a display of ignorance. If you're one of those people who thinks that the president is actually an agent of the Russian government, I also have some swampland I want to sell you. It's right here in our backyard, and it's worth $1 million. So I'm going to need you to ante up and give me a couple checks or some installment payment program. If that's you. You cannot possibly believe that Vladimir Putin turned Donald Trump, and that's the reason why he's sitting in the presidency, taking all of this flack from liberals and having his entire business empire that he's built over decades systematically taken apart, watching his children destroyed in the public media, watching the horrible attacks on his wife and his youngest son. You're telling me that he's doing all of that because he loves Putin? Yeah. I also have flying bikes and levitating rugs that I want to sell you as well, if you believe that. So what's important is that if we're going to prosecute Michael Cohen, and very well that prosecution might be valid and legitimate, or it could be a witch hunt, we don't know, then we should definitely be looking at prosecuting these others because they engaged in behavior that was completely unacceptable. And the only way to get at the root of it is to investigate them and see if there's anything that needs to be, indicted for. Like, indict somebody. Somebody put an indictment down. So that brings us to DeGeneva. He was talking about Mueller's narrative after not being able to prove collusion because we're very close to the end of this thing. And yesterday on the show, we had a little bit of audio about how we're going to definitely see the report before the end of the year. That's what people are saying. People who have no skin in the game and don't support the president at all are saying they think he's going to wrap it up before the new Congress comes in because they don't want it to look like, Mueller doesn't want it to look like he's influencing their investigations. He wants to be done with what he has to do. And so, apparently there's a lot of rumor mill going on about other people who will be indicted. And I don't place a lot of value in that until I actually see something happening. The sky is not falling. The president is in no danger of not serving out the remainder of his term, as some liberals are dancing around gleefully on their cloven hooves on Twitter, just enjoying themselves. They're just so excited because they think it's the end of Trump. I wouldn't call that one so quick. But DeGeneva, he has an interesting idea about how Mueller could paint this whole story to kind of save face. It's number 6.
The president is tweaking and trolling people and trying to just get a rise out of people. That's what he does. It's part of his shtick. But the thing to me that's fascinating is all of a sudden the entire investigation by Mueller is focusing on people who are lying. That's what it's always been about. But now it's really about lying with Stone and Corsi and Flynn and everybody. Why is that happening? The answer is very simple. The original purpose of the investigation was Russian collusion. That's failed miserably. There's no evidence of it. So what is he doing now? He's charging people with lying so that he can say in his report, I would have proved collusion, but all these people lied and prevented me from doing it. This is the new narrative of Mueller. He's not, of course, mouthing it, but his actions prove conclusively that his new narrative is, if these people hadn't lied to me, I would have been able to prove collusion. This is the new Russian collusion theme now. This is what he's going to do. That's going to be what the report's going to be about.
Right. So can you kind of like imagine it? Mueller doesn't have anything of consequence to show. He can't indict the president. And so he starts saying, well, this one and that one wouldn't, that I wasn't able to do this because of that one. I wasn't able to do that because of this one. So, basically it's their fault that I can't get a conviction on this. It's their fault that I can't do what I want to do. Mind you, I have something I absolutely want to do, which is indict the president, but I can't prove collusion. So what I might as well do is I might as well just let y'all know, yeah, it's somebody else's fault. So, and I know, I'm giggling, I'm laughing, but that is what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing. All right. So I'll open up the phone lines. The call lines are open. 866-963-2037. A little bit of a free for all. If you want to call in and talk about anything, you're welcome to, including, are you going to any Christmas parties? Do you have anything planned? So 866-963-2037. While we're seeing who wants to call in and join us, we have this story that I want to pull up right now and a little bit of audio. There's a mom, and she named her daughter ABCDE. Now, me and my daughter, who I told you she was homesick and she's been homesick all day, I told her about this story, and we were laughing about it because we were thinking to ourselves, how's that pronounced? Well, there is a little bit of audio that goes with it. And in the audio clip, she actually tells you how it's pronounced. And so I want you to listen for the moment in this audio clip where the news reporter tells you how many people in America had their parents name them ABCDE and how you pronounce that. If you see someone sign their name ABCDE Jones, there's a way to pronounce it. We were totally wrong, me and my daughter. And we're avid readers, and we thought we thought we were close, but we're nowhere close. So let's listen to that clip.
A Texas mother says she's teaching her 5-year-old daughter that not everyone is nice. This after she says a Southwest Airlines worker name-shamed the 5-year-old girl. The family was catching a flight home from Southern California to El Paso a few weeks ago. When the gate agent saw the girl's name on her boarding pass, the mom says the worker started making fun of it.
While I was sitting there, she took a picture of my boarding pass and chose to post it on social media, mocking my daughter.
Well, her daughter's name is spelled A-B-C-D-E and pronounced Absidy. This story has generated more than 2,000 comments on the ABC 13 Facebook page. A lot of you sounding off. One viewer wrote, it's sad that someone would make fun of a little girl within earshot of her. It's even sadder that her mom or mother gave her such a ridiculous name. Sherry posted, no excuse for the employee, but when you give your kid a bizarre name, you do him or her a disservice. Southwest has apologized to that family and says it will follow up with the employee involved. According to the Social Security Administration, nearly 330 people have been given the name spelled A-B-C-D-E in the U.S.
330 people. I was about to say 33. 333 Americans have parents dumber than a bag of rocks who name them ABCDE. Now, this chick actually has, she said it's pronounced Absidy, which if she wanted to name her daughter Absidy, she could have just spelled it A-B-S-I-D-Y or A-B-C-I-D-Y. She could have done anything other than this. So obviously my daughter and I also went through a whole list of of nicknames that she could use, and we thought she should just use AB and call herself Abby, and then she would have a normal name. But the little girl is not to blame here. And also, if you're out there in listener land, and this is not a racial thing, but if you think that it's a black mom, it's not. The mom is not black, and the little girl is so cute and sweet, and it's just hard to imagine how parents are in their world. You know, other kids' parents who interact with them, what they must go through when they call this child Absidy, and she has to write her name down, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if she's 5, she's already learned her ABCs. She has to have noticed that, she has to have noticed that her name is the beginning of the alphabet. She has to have. So this is the world we live in, where anything goes, and any kind of stigmatization that would occur where people naturally, so I know that you know this, but I have to state it for posterity. When people stigmatize certain behaviors, it is basically it's like a fence or a guardrail that shows other people not to do those, like, don't do that. And there used to be like a thing where the hospital would say, if you try to name your child something like a body part, they'd say that's not allowed. And it wasn't really a law, but it was a safety mechanism that nurses use to prevent people from, misnaming their child, because there should be like a law where we have so many laws, we don't even know how many we have. But it seems to me like there would be some kind of a rule where if you did that to your child, there'd be some kind of repercussions for you, and that your child could rename themselves. If you name your child something unpronounceable or something that's unspellable or 2 words mashed together that you just made up, or like this lady, she was so lazy that she just took the first few letters of the alphabet. Now in the chat room, people are like, it's so it's not actually spelled ABCEEDEE. It's ABCDE, literally just the first letters of the alphabet. No, the first letter's capitalized, the rest of the letters are all lowercase, and then she pronounces it Absidy. Such a shame for a beautiful child like that to have that name foisted upon her and for her to have to deal with it. And I didn't even look. I should have looked. Do they even show what the daughter's the mom named the middle name? Like, what's the middle name of this child? I mean, it's just like, I don't know. And the jokes that people have ensued. So notice in the story, they said that someone from Southwest management was going to talk to the employee. I imagine they're probably talking to her, giving her all of their own jokes and seeing what jokes she made, because I just can't see them actually reprimanding this woman, even though it's not right to make fun of people online, especially children. But what exactly is Southwest going to do? Also, other people have jokes. Her brother is 12345, or her brother's name is FGHIJ. I wonder how she would pronounce that. I don't know if she has any of them, any more children, I should say. Now, a little bit more detail. It's not unheard of for people to be named ABCDE. In 2014, Vocative reported that over the past 30 years, 328 baby girls have been given that name, and 32 babies were given that name in 2009. What do you think was in the water that year? But when the name is entered into the Social Security Administration's database of popular baby names, it states that ABCDE is not in the top 1,000 names for any year of birth beginning with the year 2000. Now listen to some of these other ones. Nicknames for someone named ABCDE is, one of them is Cece, Sidy, SIDY, Abby, which my daughter and I came up with, Izzy, XYZZIE, AB, AEBI, and Seedy, SEEDY. Now, where are we getting this stuff from? Because you're probably thinking, where are you getting that kind of crazy? From the babynamewizard.com website. You know it's bad when even the nicknames are bad. So Southwest has, obviously, they've apologized, and, you know, they say they have a zero tolerance, you know, but we all know that this is only the beginning. You know how cruel kids can be. This is only the beginning of the mocking that she's going to get. If she's not in school yet, maybe the mom's planning on homeschooling her, so she'll never have to worry about it. But I can tell you, there are no more opportunities for her to get away with not having that name mocked, because most kids are going to think she's kidding. Like, most people are going to say, oh, that's not your real name. And then when she says it is, that's when everything's going to break loose. And there'll be some kind-hearted, compassionate kids who'll say, don't make fun. It's not her fault. Her mom and dad named her that. And that's true. It's true that we shouldn't mock her for it because it was none of her own doing. But she's the one who's going to bear the brunt of the sorrow about this. And it's her mom's fault. All right. So follow us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We actually live stream to YouTube and Facebook every day. And also we have a live stream over at the Periscope as well. And we'd really appreciate if you'd share the show so other people can find out about it and kind of fight back against the conservative clampdown that all these organizations are doing. And we did have, obviously, Jesse Lee Kelly, who's been on the program, Jesse Kelly. He's been on the program a ton of times. He's a Marine Corps combat veteran, and he does a lot of radio and television. And he was actually suspended from Twitter with no, like, he didn't get, not suspended, he was dumped off of the Twitter platform without so much as a warning. And when the backlash ensued, even Josh Hawley, Missouri's own Josh Hawley, actually tweeted out about it and called for an investigation. And within a couple of days of backlash, Twitter restored his account. But other news that's even bigger than Jesse Kelly getting suspended and then reinstated is that Fox News has not tweeted from their account to their 18 million followers in a month since the whole thing broke off with one of their stars, Tucker Carlson. Remember, he was attacked at his home, and the people who did the attack were allowed to maintain their Twitter feeds. So news that it had been a month since they had tweeted actually caused Twitter's stock to drop yesterday significantly. So the wars are on. We'll be back with more after this. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Tucker Carlson is an author, founder of the Daily Caller website, and host of a debate show on cable's Fox News Network. He is known for his brutally honest commentary on the state of politics and culture. Because of this, he has been declared the enemy of the Democrats' mob action arm, Antifa. Recently, a group of Antifa thugs calling themselves Smash Racism published Carlson's home address and filmed themselves defacing his cars and driveway while hurling themselves against his front door. The Carlson children were not at home, only his wife was. She called 911 and locked herself in the pantry. Carlson was at his office at Fox News preparing to broadcast his program. Police responded and dispersed the crowd. It's outrageous that not one of the assailants was arrested. This was no protest. It was criminal trespass, attempted breaking and entering, and destruction of private property. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called Tune In. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
Operation Christmas Child is about evangelism through a simple shoebox gift. And it's about discipleship through the greatest journey. The Greatest Journey is a 12-lesson discipleship course that teaches children who Jesus is, what it means to follow him, and how to share this incredible message with others. Join Urban Family Talk Wednesday, December 5th to find out more, or visit SamaritansPurse.org/OCC.
Fox on Tech.
Google's Smart Compose has been around a few months now. If you use Gmail, you've likely seen it at the bottom of the screen, ready with a handful of quick suggested replies like, let's set up the lunch, or sounds great, see you Friday. The context of the replies is the message itself, as well as historic data from your and others' email. But now, a bit of a preemptive strike. The search giant is removing gender pronouns, so users won't see him or her as suggested auto responses. Google says ditching the pronouns wasn't for lack of trying, it's just that none of the artificial intelligence fixes worked well. The company has already faced issues with algorithms auto-completing searches. Back in 2016, they ran into some trouble when some searches suggested anti-Semitic queries, so it could have simply been a matter of time before a suggested autocomplete would misidentify the recipient's gender that would have created an uproar. As of now, that email autocomplete feature is available on Gmail, both on the web and in the app. With Fox on Tech, I'm Brett Larson, Fox News.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'm only smiling because I was deployed as a United States Marine on the southern border of the United States. I worked for an unmanned aerial vehicle squadron in the Marine Corps, and we were charged with, among other things, coming up with new doctrine to figure out how to secure our southern border. So this is not unprecedented to use the military, especially United States Marines, in ways that the president would direct. A nation that cannot secure its borders, it's often been said, is not indeed a nation. But I would hope that we in Congress would do our job. You know, this is a manifestation of a much bigger problem, which is our failure in a bipartisan way to reform our legal immigration system. I'm a strong supporter of doing that.
Yeah, but I'm kind of feeling as if the reform, when people say reforming our immigration system, what they really mean is tearing down all barriers to immigration and just letting anybody in who wants to come in. Most of the people who feel this way, you know, they live in neighborhoods that would not be impacted by this because they're locked out. Lower income people are locked out of their neighborhoods. And, you know, a lot of people live in neighborhoods like that. A lot of Americans live in, and I don't mean they're controlled or gated. I mean, there's a certain number of dwellings in the space. It's fully developed. There's no room to build anything new there. And therefore, property values are very, very high. So they live in these areas, and once they've gotten in and gotten their little piece of nirvana, they can't imagine why you, in your town, in a rural area, or in your suburban area where there actually is, you know, a viable home market for rentals and purchases, and there are apartments and etc., they can imagine why you wouldn't want to have your space filled up with refugees from some other country. And I know that there's room in our country for us to take people in who are being persecuted from abroad, but the definition of refugee means the only people who can be legitimate refugees are those fleeing war and violence who live in Mexico or Canada, and neither of those countries are experiencing war and violence. So it's the country next to you that you go to because you're expected to just stay there and then go back. You're not expected to go to that country and start over again and never return to your home country. Otherwise, then you're not a refugee. You're an immigrant, which means get at the back of the line. Yes, it takes 10 to 20 years to get in. Sorry about that. Next. That's what it means. So, you know, that it appears to be what the problem, it's kind of like people are discussing this from a perspective that doesn't acknowledge the truth of what a refugee is, what an immigrant is, why we have such a long waiting list, et cetera, et cetera. So knowing that we have some roots in Anchorage, Alaska. We have some family that lives there. And apparently there was a large earthquake and aftershocks which struck south central Alaska, and damage has been reported around the region. In the photograph, they show a piece of road that has completely collapsed and earth that has fallen away from nearby, and like a car is trapped kind of down on the collapsed road. Really fascinating. Of course, anything having to do with Alaska, people act like Sarah Palin's the only one who lives there. And we actually have, so my husband has a cousin who lives just over the main drag from the Palins. So when we went to her house a couple years ago when we were in Alaska, we drove up and so we were at her house for hours, and then we went out. And as we were pulling out, she said, look over that way. And I'm like, what? She's like, just up that hill. That's where the Palins live. I was like, you got to be kidding me. She's like, nope, that's where they live. The Palin family lives there. And so she's not big into politics or anything. It's nothing like that. But she knows that they live there. And so my husband and I were joking around. My husband was like, you're going to go up there, aren't you? And I was like, no, of course not. Because I respect people's privacy. That would be so upsetting to me if someone show up, you know, just like some stranger and say, I know you live here. That's horrifying. So I wouldn't do that to her. But it's an interesting little aside because I couldn't believe that my husband's cousin literally lives that close to her. So you've got this large earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 7 striking Alaska near Anchorage early Friday morning, damaging roads and buildings, knocking out power, and sending people fleeing from buildings in hoping to be safe beneath door jams. The epicenter was just north of Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. According to the Alaska Earthquake Center, it violently shook the most populous region of the state at about 8:30 a.m., just as people were settling in to work and school. So no immediate reports of major injuries, but there's been some serious structural damage. And then there were several aftershocks. Around 10:26 a.m., a couple of hours after the initial, earthquake, there were a series of aftershocks, and at least 3 of the aftershocks were 5 on the Richter scale. Wow. So there was a tsunami warning for South Central Alaska, including Kenai, Kodiak, and the shores of Cook Inlet. But that was canceled later on after they issued it. There were several reports of serious damage. Glen Highway was closed north of Eagle River, and Minnesota Boulevard collapsed. Wow. Vine Road near Wasilla also suffered major damage. Now, Wasilla is where the Palins live. She said her family is fine, but her home is not. So we're assuming that they experienced some really negative impacts there. So yeah, it's interesting because of the connections, obviously, and of course we hope and pray that there will be fine, and that there won't be anarchy, as people are saying. The tsunami warning was canceled, by the way. So turning to this big, we have this big, huge deal down in South America right now, which is that we had the G20 meeting together, and apparently it was full of tension, and people have been quarreling, and people have been upset, which is interesting. But we also have the French president, Macron, at the G20, actually took the leader of Saudi Arabia to task. He was kind of yelling at him and said, "You never listened to me." Like he's his girlfriend. Okay, I'm sorry. A clearly irked French President Emmanuel Macron was heard telling Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, "You never listened to me." This was caught on video. The comments were made during a private conversation between the two leaders about the murder of Saudi activist Jamal Khashoggi. Gosh, sorry, I messed that up. So, "You never listened to me," he said in English. So bin Salman says, "No, I will listen, of course." Also in English, before launching into a fit of laughter. Macron was undeterred and continued on. He said, "I'm a man of my word." So he's there yelling like a little girl. The official told Reuters that the clip demonstrated a sort of contrast between MBS's face, sporting an embarrassed smile, and the French president's face, which was rather stern and was keen to convey these messages in a very firm manner. U.S. intelligence officials have reportedly concluded that Mohammed bin Salman must have at least known about the plot to kill Khashoggi, who had written some columns for the Washington Post. So he was not an American journalist. He wasn't an American citizen. He wasn't a columnist for the Washington Times, or Washington Post, sorry. He was just a dude who wrote some columns, and he's closely aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood, which the royalty in Saudi Arabia wants to distance themselves from. They don't want those terrorists operating within their country. So Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told reporters on Wednesday that the murder was heinous, but that there was no piece of intelligence linking MBS, which is his nickname, Mohammed bin Salman, to the murder. So they also have video on this article, which is over at foxnews.com, of MBS doing the bro handshake where you pull your hand way out and first you slap hands and then you pull in, and it's not a full hug, but it's like, the hands are close, with Vladimir Putin. So they're mad about that. Bin Salman's playful nature with Macron appeared to later rub off on Russian President Vladimir Putin, who was captured in another clip grinning ear to ear while giving the Saudi leader a hearty high five. Images of the pair sitting next to each other at the summit in Argentina showed them clearly in agreement and laughter about something. So I wonder, is Mohammed bin Salman an agent of the Russian state and under the control of Vladimir Putin like Trump is? Are they both mind-controlled robots acting as treasonous felons within the governments of their respective countries, just plotting and seeking to destroy their countries, especially their political enemies, all at the behest of Vladimir Putin? Or am I mocking them on a Friday afternoon because those assertions are so crazy? Yeah, it's number 2. So I think it's funny because Mohammed bin Salman he's kind of on the young side. And of course, obviously he's a royal over there in Saudi Arabia. And so he has the best of both worlds because he gets to wear the red and white towel thingy and he gets to be royal and he gets to have all that money, but he gets to travel around and have the best of access to luxurious things, not only in his own country, but abroad in the Western world. And so he has to see someone like Emmanuel Macron, who is like, he's like a beta male or a metro man, he's not hardy, and he doesn't seem like if he got mad at you, you'd be scared. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't put the fear into you. He can't give you a look and make you really concerned for your safety or even the relationship. Like, he does not inspire other people to fear him. And Mohammed bin Salman seems like he's a bit on the young side, but that he could be pretty stern, and he could be pretty inspiring in the whole, you don't want to cross me thing. And then you've got Donald Trump, the ultimate man's man, who clearly, when he wants to put an impression on you, he doesn't hold back, and you are left with an impression. And so it's kind of interesting to hear Macron kind of saying, you don't listen to me, knowing that we all know, even people out there who are feminists who want to deny the male mystique, and that there is a man's man out there, that is a thing, that there are men's men, and that women recognize that. Women recognize male power. We respect it. We enjoy it, except feminists, but they're rarely with men anyway, so it doesn't matter. And of course, Emmanuel Macron is attractive to some types of women. Clearly, his wife likes him, but he's not a man's man. And so all the men's men at the G20, clearly it's kind of like a brotherhood of leaders where you have all these people there who they're powerful and they lead nations, and there are different types of leaders in the space. Obviously, there are women there, women who like Angela Merkel and Theresa May from Great Britain. There are women there, and they have their own kind of sisterhood, if you will. I'm sure they have some things that they commiserate about, even in their state of disagreement, especially between Great Britain and Germany right now with Brexit. But it's interesting that this would be happening now because they want some kind of repercussions for the Khashoggi thing. And they're not going to get it. They're not going to, I should say, they're not going to get what they want. And instead of them just, you win some, you lose some, you move on, they're going to whine about it. And they're going to get all stompy foot about it. And that's what we see with Emmanuel Macron. And it will go nowhere. Not only is Donald Trump moving on from the whole story, but there are bigger fish to fry with our ally in the Middle East, which, we have obviously Israel, but we are also allies with Saudi Arabia. We sell them a lot of weapons. We have military bases in their country, and they've already met many times. Well, a few times. They've met more than once, our president and the leader of their country. This is an ongoing relationship that's not going to be allowed to disintegrate because of Khashoggi's assassination. And whatever you feel about it, again, the outsized level of concern is that this is a good issue for the media to use to distract away from positive moves that the president has made in the economy and more pressing issues that we have, such as the problem at our southern border, such as, the budget, such as the fact that even though the Democrats are going to take control of the House of Representatives, they are not going to be able to pass legislation and get it signed into law. And so it's a victory, certainly, but it is also a victory for the Republicans because we finally get to say goodbye to Jeff Flake and others who were not good for not just this president's agenda, but for people who believe in the Republican Party platform. And so, I don't have a lot of regret about the way. Obviously, I wanted the Republicans to keep the House. I wanted them to make gains. I wanted to see the Republicans controlled the Senate so that they could have defunded Planned Parenthood and fully funded the wall, et cetera, et cetera. But I see the silver lining, I should say. It's not that I don't see. I see definitely the silver lining in having so many of the people who were clearly not cut out to represent Republicans no longer being there. And them going back into the private sector is a good enough, you take a little consolation prize for what we've experienced. And that's also a great way to go into the weekend because y'all know I like going into the weekend strong with rest and relaxation on my mind. Looking forward to Sunday, getting in the pew. I recommend it to you as well. So God bless you, citizens. Straight from the heartland to you, Stacey on the right. I'll be back with you on Monday, Lord willing. Have a great weekend.